Welcome to the Programmes Dialogue. This is a series of events in preparation of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, one of the partnerships under preparation for Horizon Europe, the new framework program for research and development. This series of events is facilitating a dialogue between ERANETs with their successful formats and with their experiences of the last 10 years, and national program owners and program managers. The event series is hosted by the joint programming platform Smart Energy Systems. Please be aware that the events are provided on our YouTube channel as a live stream and as a recording, resulting in the fact that whatever you contribute in the chat or via live talk will be public. The Clean Energy Transition Partnership is going to be a transnational joint programming initiative to boost and accelerate the energy transition, building upon regional and national RDI funding programs. Therefore, the Programmes Dialogue intends to create joint knowledge about the most powerful and successful formats and tools to promote research, technology development, and innovation. In a mutual learning and capacity building exercise, we want to learn about good practices, successful activities, effective approaches, but also about the things we tried to do and that did not work out. For this, we want to create together with you an open and interactive atmosphere. The dialogue events are organized in a SureFix mode every Friday at 11 a.m. on this YouTube channel. Each event will present one or a group of initiatives, and we have already a dense schedule until mid-March. However, if you want to present your program or initiative and you are not on the list yet, please let us know and we will find a slot for you. Each of the events will have the same format of presentation blocks of about 10 to 15 minutes, highlighting a specific topic or aspect, followed by a question and answer and discussion session of about 10 minutes. If you have a question, please use the chat function in the YouTube channel. We will bring it up. You want to get on stage and discuss live with the speakers? Send your request in the chat. We will bring you up on stage. The process to develop the Clean Energy Transition Partnership has come a long way. We have started with a stakeholder groups dialogue with all the SETPlan initiatives and ERANETs, developing thematic RDI challenges in spring and summer last year. Based on these inputs in a country's dialogue, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda was developed and launched in a SETPlan conference side event in November 2020. Now we want to bring together all the partners, funding institutions, ministries, program managers and program owners that are ready to contribute to the implementation of this new joint programming initiative. The number of countries and regions joining has been growing and growing over the last months, and there are still new partners coming on board. A great core team of enthusiastic experts from different organizations all over Europe is committed to bring this initiative forward. Enjoy the program's dialogue, and now let us introduce the speakers of today. Now, a very good morning from my side. A very good morning to all our audience out in Europe, here from Vienna. I hope you're all enjoying the same nice weather today that we are doing here in Vienna. After a couple of days that were very dark, we are happy about this nice sunlight we are facing today. This is the fourth event of our series of events for the program dialogue to prepare the Clean Energy Transition Partnership. Today, we are going to present an initiative that is called the Joint Programming Platform Smart Energy Systems. I'm very happy to introduce a couple of very good speakers for you today that, besides myself, who will be in a double role today. So this is going to be an exciting presentation, as I'm working as your moderator today, but also as one of the presenters. But we have on the list Fredrik Landström from the Swedish Energy Agency, Ludwig Karg from Baum Consult in Munich, Antti Silvast from Nordic Energy, Michele De Nigris from RSE in Italy, Julia Genu from Baum Consult, and Jatta Jussila from Click Innovation in Finland. Welcome, and you will see them later in the show. At this point, I want to bring on stage and introduce to you my co-moderators. That is Gerry Brembroek from the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, as always in these dialogues, and Fredrik Lundström from the Swedish Energy Agency, also in a double role today as a presenter and as a moderator. We also present our Rishi team to you. That is Nicolas Reschen from the Austrian Ministry of Climate Action and Arno Gattinger, my colleagues who are supporting this event series, together with Christian Spanik from Net Producer in Austria and Germany, based together with Dirk Kuckertz from Tonwerk Eschweiler, who are doing a great job to support us with this new format that we are using for this event series. So let's jump right into the presentation. The initiative that we're going to present to you today is the Joint Programming Platform Smart Energy Systems. The first thing I want to talk about is, and I'm going to be the presenter of this first block, we will give you an overview about what you can expect today. That's the first thing. So what you will the blocks that you will enjoy today are first block about the platform, what are the basic concepts, the structures and processes. The second block will be about the yearly joint programming cycle. How do we initiate, fund transnational projects, and how do we work with them during their lifetime? The third block will be about what we call the knowledge community. How are we sharing and creating knowledge with and for the community? The next block will then be about our impact network approach. How can we link innovation ecosystems in Europe and co-create with need owners? And the last block will be about how do we utilize digital tools to support coordination, collaboration, communication, and information in this network. So I will be the first presenter of this first block on the platform idea. And the first thing to talk about is, okay, what is the topic here? I mean, what are we talking about when we say smart energy systems? What is this all about? And we can say that it's very much about energy system integration. So how can we bring all the technologies that are around into a holistic system that is seamlessly working in an integrated way? And it's also about energy system transformation. So how do we go from our today's system to the systems that we expect, how we expect it to be in the future? So it's about sector coupling, it's about smart power grids, it's about integrated regional energy systems, flexibility and storage, energy communities, digitalization. But it's also about heating and cooling systems and solutions, because we are talking about integrated systems. And not only those technology aspects are important, but also resilience and security markets for solution providers of a certain size, and interoperability, seamless integration, and also about how can we organize the learning from the pilots that we have around in Europe and all the countries? How can we work together on scaling up and replication, on validation of solutions? How can we initiate and work with RDI initiatives and initiate the change with these initiatives? So a lot of bunch of topics that we had in front of us when we were thinking about to start and set up this initiative. And that brings me to more or less the solution that we found. The answer to this is our platform that meanwhile consists of more than 30 funding partners from more than 25 European and also associated countries, and meanwhile also from countries from outside Europe like Morocco and India that have joined the platform. And you see here all the funding partners that are engaged here. When looking on this development that we have to foster, and we really want to foster this flourishing of innovation from the local and regional trials that when we started the initiative we found all over Europe in our partner countries, how can we bring them together towards a transnational knowledge community, and how can we organize the learning to enable the right technologies, market designs, customer adoption, and everything that is needed to achieve the European smart energy system goals. I will now introduce a couple of basic concepts that we have developed and which will then play a role in the further parts of our presentation today. One of the basic concepts when you look on these different topics that I have introduced at the beginning is what we call the interdisciplinary three-layer research model. We thought if we want to successfully support this development towards integrated energy systems, we have not only to talk about technology. I mean, of course, we have to talk about technology, about cross-energy carrier solutions, about grid automation, about telecommunications, machine learning, technological research, heating grids, and so on. But we also have to talk about what we call the layer of marketplace. So how do we organize this energy system, the interplay between the players and the technologies and the assets in this system? What are the right market designs with new goods and services? What are the business models that we need, the regulatory framework, economic aspect research that we have to do, and so on. And moreover, we also have to talk about the aspects of transition, what we call the adoption layer. So how does the innovation that we create really become part of the daily life of companies, of industries, and also of customers in all over Europe. So this is also an important aspect. The second concept, basic concept that I want to introduce is the 3 dimensions of integration. If we want to go into an integrated energy system, of course, we have to talk about smart energy system aspects as already introduced. So how do the different parts of the energy system technically interfere to each other? But more than that, we have to talk about cross-sectoral integration. And in this case, we not only mean cross-sectoral in terms of different energy sectors, but it's really about how do we integrate between the transport sector and the energy sector, how we integrate between industry and trade and the energy system, how we integrate municipal infrastructure or agricultural regions. And the third pillar is about linking innovation ecosystems and the local and regional development. How, if we want at the end, implement those solutions on a regional level and in very many different regions in Europe, then we have to link to the governance level, to the need owners that at the end will implement these solutions and use the technologies. We have to link the innovation ecosystems from the different regions in Europe down to the SMEs, crafts, and startups also on the global level that are out there. And a third basic concept is what I would call here the policy cycle. So what we intend to do is we have these roadmaps, these implementation plans out there on our national, but also on the European level. And we, with our initiative, want to create joint calls, programs, joint programming at the end to create and facilitate what we call a family of projects or families of projects that will do research and innovation in this field. And we don't only want to facilitate these projects, but at the end want to actively work with them to build a community and a knowledge community and create knowledge that we all together can work with within our national programs on the EU level, on the international level, and at the end feed it back into the genesis of these roadmaps and updating our implementation plans, knowing what we have done, what we have reached so far, and where we have to go next by this steady, ongoing policy cycle. That means, and that's how we implemented these ideas, that we came across different focus initiatives that we started in the last years on different topics following this policy cycle, where we found out new focus topics that we wanted to implement. And each of these focus initiatives is working on its own on the generation of joint calls, generation of projects, and feeding into the whole initiative. And this resulted so far in a number of 30 funding partners working together, having funded nearly 70 RDI projects, and already provided roughly 100 million euro of funding to projects, which altogether built this knowledge community and are working together in this initiative. Some of them have resulted also in joint calls that we brought into the international initiative Mission Innovation and have formed the Mission Innovation calls over the last years. So with this initiative, we, on the one hand side, want to support and facilitate the collaboration of funding programs. That's the main idea of the ERNETs, of course. But on a second pillar, we also want to create and share strategic knowledge within the knowledge community. And in a third pillar, we also want to link the innovation ecosystems from the regional to the European level with an approach that we call the impact network approach, where we work with associated partners beyond the funding partners and beyond the partners that we have in the funded projects. And that results at the end in the structures that we have created in the institutional model that we have implemented, which is working on different layers. On the one hand side, a decision layer with a steering board, a second layer which is operational, working together with the funding agencies to bring out the joint calls every year, and the other layer of the associated partner network that we are going to introduce to you later on in more detail, and the fourth layer, the transnational projects, which we actively work together. And this is reflected in a coordination structure that is able to support the work on these different layers. You see that on the left side. So there's a coordination, a consortium management, which is working very much with the funding partners on the decision level. On the operational level, we have a call management, which is working with the funding partners on the development and implementation of the calls. And then we have coordination services, which is supporting this work very much. And we have the knowledge community management, which is working actively with the associated partners and the transnational projects that we are funding. And you see here that this is also enabling us to collaborate and to bring this knowledge up to the European level, working, of course, together with the European Commission, but also with the set-plan initiatives, particularly with the set-plan initiative on Action 4, the implementation working group of set-plan Action 4, the related ETIPs, mainly ETIP smart networks for the energy transition, but also other European technology and innovation platforms in the field, like deep geothermal, PV, and renewable heating and cooling, etc. We can also relate our supporting teams with the supporting teams on the European level. And so you see here on the left side which institutions are involved, and this should tell you that already in the coordination of this initiative, we have a broad spread all through Europe, because there are institutions involved from the Nordics to Italy, RSE, Munich Baum Consult, Sweden, and Austria. So already in the coordination, we are doing a big part of the collaboration. The team consists of a number of people that many of them you will see today. This should only tell you that there are in each of the organizations more people in the background. Coordination, consortium management is done by our funding agency in Austria with 2 people. The call management has several people from Swedish Energy Agency and also from Nordic Energy. We have the coordination services at Baum Consult. You will meet them today, but they also have more stuff working on this in the background. And together with Click Innovation and RSE, they are working on the knowledge community management. That brings me to the introduction of our first talk guest today, and that is Michele De Nigris. He is the Director of Sustainable Development and Energy Sources Department in RSE in Italy. And why I loop him in here is because he has a special role to play in the collaboration and coordination between the work of our platform on the one hand side and the European level on the other hand side. Because Michele is co-chairing the implementation working group of set-plan Action 4, which is about energy networks and energy systems. And here he's doing a great job to link the world of the agencies and funders that we have here in our club with the world of the ETIPs and industry players on the European level. So first of all, hi Michele, good to have you here in the meeting.
Good morning, very happy to be on the stage together with you, my friend Michael.
Thanks for being around. So the implementation working group, or the set-plan Action 4, is one of 10 set-plan actions that we have out there. Many of our audience, I think, will know them very well. So we are doing a job here in one sector that is about the energy systems. So how is the work going in this implementation working group? What's the role of the implementation working group of the
Yes,
SEPRAN Action 4?
thank you, Michael. The implementation working group number 4 is one of the 10 actions of the integrated European set plan, essentially dealing with action 4, that is resilience and security of the energy system. As all the implementation working groups, the actors here are member state representatives. The aim, as all the others, is the alignment and coordination of the different plans in order to identify targets that are enough challenging and that are realistic to be reached. Having set some of the targets, we needed to identify activities that could be interesting for the different countries, but also practical, that can be reached. So not only utopical activities, and that could be inserted and adopted in the national and in the regional research and development programs. So we wanted to join forces towards a common goal because we all know that the challenges we are facing are so high that none of us will reach it alone, and especially in time. So what we have done, we have gathered 15 countries around 6 main targets, and we have identified 27 activities that can be classified, we can say, into 3 categories: the cross-cutting activities, the flagship 1 activity dealing mostly on power systems, and the flagship 2 activity which focuses on local and regional integrated systems. The member states have started to use this scheme to set up projects at national and EU levels. And our implementation plan was published in 2018. But since the beginning, we have seen that we needed expertise on the ground to identify at very practical and physical level how to bring these targets that you can see on the slide into real activities. To be very frank, we needed expertise. We needed expertise from the real experts inside the network operators, with the industry and so on. So we called very much the expertise from the ETIPs, the European Technology and Innovation Platforms, with special reference to the ETIPS net. It means smart networks for the energy transition, and the ETIP, renewable heating and cooling. So we have worked with them to elaborate our actions, and we have developed, therefore, these 2 flagship initiatives that you can see here. On the slide. In the meantime, of course, time goes by, and the ETIPSnet has published their documents: the vision document, the roadmap document, and the implementation plan document. So we found out there was a need to foster collaboration and alignment, to try not to make people lose each other, into and be confused by potentially conflicting messages. So we have looked for an alignment of the 2 different documents. We have reached a complete alignment on flagship initiative number 1, and we are working on the flagship initiative number 2, that is marginally in the scope of the ETIPSnet, but which is very, very focused on the renewable heating and cooling. But of course, we also needed connections with other actors, and here I come to the play here with the ERANET. We needed connections with the owners of the money. We need connections with the managers of the projects. So we needed connections with the ERANETs. We found out that there was a great possibility and a great opportunity with the ERANET joint programming platform, especially on the smart energy systems. We found out there was very close because there were similar goals. We could connect with the project financing agencies that actuate, that realize in practice and finance the programs and the strategies of the activities that somehow were very much aligned with the goals and the actions of the IWG4. But that's not the only aspect. We found out that we could leverage the knowledge platform. We could also identify practical ways to build up consensus, adoption, excitements of the subject of the different flagships. And thanks to the tools that have been set up in the ERANET joint program platform on smart energy systems, I think this collaboration is becoming of very, very strategic level. And I think that going on with this collaboration and also using the knowledge that has been and the relations that have been set up in the between the IWG4 and the ERANET, we could contribute also to the setting up of the Clean Energy Technology Partnership Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. We have common objectives, we have coordinated action plans, and we could merge and focus in such a way as to align investments, strategies at national, European, and also regional levels. So I think this is good opportunities.
Thank you very much, Michele, for making very clear how this initiative is embedded in the overall European framework. Now, Gary might have a number of questions because you are the one not so involved in all these initiatives as we three are. But for timing reasons, I propose to keep the questions for later on. Maybe some of them will be answered during the presentations. I also see that we have really a lot of people in the audience joining us today. Thank you very much for being there and being very active in the chat. We are collecting your questions and we will bring them up during the next sessions where we have also these question and answer parts. But for the moment, we move forward to the second presentation block. The second presentation block is about the joint programming cycle. So between 2015 and 2019, this platform has organized 5 transnational joint calls with public funding of more than 100 million euro. It started with a focus initiative on smart grids, as I've shown, and went through other topics over the years. And every year there was a joint call. This was only possible because of a very focused approach of this yearly joint programming cycle, which brings the initiative to a next level from organizing single joint calls to strategic planning and multi-annual joint programming. And this is what Fredrik and Antti will tell us about. Hello, Antti.
Hello, everybody.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael. I will start off with the first slides, and then later on I will introduce my colleague Antti. So I work at the Swedish Energy Agency, for those of you who are not familiar with that, and we are doing shared responsibilities with the Nordic Energy Research on the call management of our initiative. And I think we had a good introduction now of the thoughts about the platform idea and how to put different things together. I also think some of the things that you mentioned, Michele, around how to work with a set plan and to achieve these grand challenges where we need to not be alone, but we need to combine our efforts. I will say a few things about how do we try to do that coordination and combination of efforts between funding partners and organizations in a network. So this is a little piece of the puzzle, but an important piece. So maybe if you move on to the next slide, please, Antti. I will start with a question, because I think this is very much, it's not something new, I think, for anyone that had worked with joint programming or planning, but we have really tried to put a lot of effort into thinking about how can we handle what, from one point of view, is a coordination and information problem. If you have 30 funding partners and you want to move in a cycle where you are more or less harmonized and you can do planning, there is a lot of information to share. You need to do a lot of coordination. How can you do that in an efficient way? And as an example, I here compare with how do you plan your vacation? When we plan vacation, you probably know that there are some holidays in your country that will, notice that this makes it easier, of course, because you know when about to celebrate, if you celebrate Christmas, or you know when to celebrate Easter. And when you know these things, then you don't need to exchange information every year about when this happens. So this is one maybe obvious thing, but to keep in mind, can we create a season with our joint work that makes it easier for us to coordinate with all the funding partners, and that makes it to a minimum the amount of information we need to exchange? So if you go to the next slide, we try to do that. Of course, it is very difficult, if not to say impossible, to keep it exactly the same way each year. But what we try to do is every year as it went on, we tried to be clear about, okay, we try to do these things in Q1, we try to do these things in Q2, so that everyone, not only on a personal level, could get into the thinking of, okay, when will we discuss the next call topics, or when will we open the next call? How will the planning look next year? But with time, from not only a personal level, but also on an institutional level, because the programs collaborating learn and they have to adapt somehow to this joint cycle. So this is the way we have put it up. Then, of course, if you bring on new partners or you collaborate with other networks, you need to adjust it. But the idea is that still try to keep a repetition so that it becomes like a routine, or you can hope for a longer term, a little bit like a culture of working together. Then you can have many partners that do things together, even though you don't need to exchange too much information. Next slide, please. So this we've used to launch the different calls we've had. And here you can see as a stairwalk. And for each of these calls, of course, it comes with a responsibility to report on the projects or follow up the reporting from the projects. There's also a responsibility not only for the monitoring, but also to integrate them into our knowledge community, but also when we have new partners to prepare for the new calls. And this is what we try to get into the wheel you saw on the picture before. So if you take the next slide again, please, and you can move forward again, just in courtesy of saving some time, we move right over to, this is just an illustration of the work effort. Again, this is nothing unique for us. This is similar, I guess, for all ERANET networks that works with continuous yearly calls. So what this picture illustrates is that every call you start, you get more and more responsibility, and you can see there's always a peak in front of you. Next year, we will have another set of new projects, and we need to finalize those that were beforehand. And as long as we continue to launch new calls, it will be a steady state or an increasing level if the calls become bigger. If we stop doing calls, it will go down. What we illustrate here is with the programming cycle, we try to coordinate this, both thinking on what we have already started and to make it come into a good finalization and outreach with the results, but also to prepare for what is coming in the future at the same time as implementing what we are doing at the moment. I also wrote here, set in the arrow, with the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, somehow this will be integrated, what we're doing, into that work. or there will be some bridging between what we do now as a platform of smart energy system, but then later on in a bigger partnership. Next slide, please. So I would just say an introductory word here. I will hand over to Antti. We had now on the planning, but we also, as Michael mentioned in the beginning, we work with some different concepts. One is the 3-layer research model. So now it's a little bit more on the detail. How do we think about this in terms of what the projects contain and how we do the evaluation? So please, Antti, maybe you could explain a little bit for us about the 3-layer research model and how we evaluate around that.
Yes, thank you very much, Fredrik. So I'm Antti Silvasta. I'm working in Nordic Energy Research, which has its headquarters in Oslo. And I will take a little example of how we evaluate projects according to the 3-layer research model. Right since the beginning of the initiative, we have taken a keen interest in interdisciplinarity, and this is not perhaps a highly unusual interest in today's energy research. It forms an increasing part of how energy researchers work. We are expected to be interdisciplinary. It is also in the interest of many funding organizations, national and regional, and including the European Commission's attempts to mainstream interdisciplinary research. With this kind of interest in mind, we want to promote transnational projects that have both interdisciplinary and cross-professional aspects in them, and have created the 3-layer model that both structures the projects that you write this initiative. It also structures the evaluation processes, and later on the reporting requirements in projects that are successful. Michael has already explained the 3 models, so I think I don't have to luckily do it again. It's a very good explanation. But basically, we have 3 names for 3 layers. One of them is stakeholders adoption, the other is goods and services, the third one is technology. Each one of them is of course interrelated with each other, but they answer to slightly different goals and problems. And as Michael has explained, the stakeholder layer is about adoption, overcoming barriers to adoption, and perhaps also furthering the adoption, and so doing. Goods and services is about the energy market participants, creating solutions for the market participants through the projects that we fund. And technology is always central to everything that we do within this program. I have kind of in the last kind of part of these few minutes that I have, I will explain a little bit of the principles behind these 3 layers that we look in the evaluation phase with independent experts that evaluate the proposals. One of them is that we expect more than one of these layers to be covered. So it is possible to only cover one layer, but the reasons have to be good, and the projects that cover more than one layer will be prioritized. So there is a strong expectation that all of the layers are covered in most of the projects that we get. We are aiming to be concrete with what we do here. So if you read the call text, this is in the annex of the call text that we put out. The methodologies and approaches and theories and data are very central to how projects should be formed in these 3 layers. They are about what you will do in the project, about the content of the research. This also furthermore leads to the kind of team that you will involve in a project. So we encourage interdisciplinary teams. If you, for example, want to have a method to handle adoption issues, it is very beneficial to have a member in the team that has expertise to do it. Those are the kind of general principles. We are also listing them in the call text. And this gets me to the evaluation practices a little bit. In the evaluation phase, the other proposals that come in are read by independent experts. We try to get an even representation from all the 3 layers. An example could be the adoption layer, that we invite social scientists in the goods and services, and economists, and the technology and engineering scholar, for example. The roles are a little bit more flexible than that, but that's the principle. When the evaluators get the proposals, each one of them reads the whole proposal irrespective of their disciplinary background independently, and can of course disagree at this point on various aspects of the project. What happens afterwards is that the experts that have read a proposal get together and form a consensus around this project. So it's a mix of consensus method and a method that also respects disciplinary differences. We don't, I mean, last thing that I want to say to stop here is that we don't want to be the model of interdisciplinary working, mainly because there cannot be one model that fits all the projects everywhere and all the projects we get. It is meant to support project to form structure around their approaches, specific market and adoption challenges, and need owners and stakeholders. I will end here and let Fredrik back to talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fredrik and Antti, for this presentation. And yeah, you stepped into one of the principles that we have developed here in more detail, and maybe we get some questions on this. You touched already a little bit, Antti, how this is reflected in the project. So the projects are expected at least to try to cover more as one of these layers. When I remember back to our first calls, it was also a new, let's say, culture that we had to develop to evaluate these projects, right? Because of course we were used normally that many technical experts were looking at the projects, and it was, some kind also of a change of a culture to find the right people to look on these projects. Any reflections on how is it difficult, I mean, to evaluate these projects as they getting so many more dimensions as just only technology?
It is something that we put extensive work behind. So we put a lot of effort into this, into kind of addressing this issue that you mentioned. It has to do, I recognize what you say, Mihail, and there's a couple of aspects to this in terms of some kind of how we address these issues. One is the getting the independent evaluation, inviting the kinds of experts who are willing to do interdisciplinary dialogue across these different dimensions. It requires a certain degree of willing to let go of your own disciplinary perspective and willing to see what others know and what you don't know. There are many experts that can do that. So that the people themselves are quite important. Second thing, I guess I would like to say, is the organization of the dialogues themselves. Also, thinking goes behind how we structure these discussions, how we prepare the referees of the independent evaluators, and what is asked from them. For instance, they read the 3-layer model beforehand. So those are kind of the two things I would like to mention. There are probably more than that as well.
Yeah, so we see there are certain learning process that such an initiative has to undergo. Gedi, when you listen to all these kind of stuff that we want to tell you about, so what questions do you have, or were some things unclear that we can clarify?
Well, what I would like to discuss is because you started off with, and I am coming from a very technology-oriented background, but I can imagine that this is also true for some of the funding organizations that are in your network. How have you dealt with that? Because if you're going for social research, not all funding agencies might be able to fund such activities. Can you comment on that?
Yes, before Fredrik and Antti are stepping in, just one sentence from my side. I think it's really a very important topic that you're raising, and it's a cultural change that is implied with the topic that we're after. That's why I started with this kind of puzzle of keywords that I introduced at the beginning, because then you see that there are so many topics that we deal with it from another angle, and it's not only a learning process for the network itself and for the partnership, but also for the funding agencies and for the whole culture of our programming. And doing this together, to me, is very exciting, because some countries are a little bit more ahead of this and some are followers, but it's an intense discussion. And particularly, it's not only about, on the one hand side, involving researchers in the other fields of transition and social aspects, but also finding practitioners that can at the end implement the findings in the real world. So how do we work at the end with designers that can design technology and product in a way that it becomes user-friendly, or how can we implement the business models? So it's not really only about social research or something like this, but also about finding a way to implement this at the end.
So just a short comment on your question, Gerdi. I mean, it's true. Not all funding agencies can fund, for instance, social science, and so this is something we need to be clear on when we launch the call and we make information that this is an sort of ambition on a project level. There will not be a discrimination if your project is focusing on one or two layer, in the sense that they still need to find a way to relate to someone that might work on the other level. So one way can be that a project can interlink to other projects that has a combining knowledge or perspective, but also within the project you can combine partners from different countries or regions, which can be funded in different fields. So here, and I would really like to point out, this is actually a benefit with the ERANET model. One of the struggles we have is to combining the different agencies, but here you can still get interdisciplinary research, but with partners from a funding agency that would not fund it. And we found that, I think, beneficial.
Yeah. How about the development of a call? How are all these 30 funding agencies? How do you work with them to come to the concept of call?
So we have an ongoing process with the monthly management board meetings, where all the program managers meet, and then we follow that yearly cycle. So about this time of the year, now it happens to be a bit of an exception, since we're collaborating with Geothermica on some topics at the moment. But when we are just within our network and the combined consortia, in the spring, it's the time to launch and bring on ideas, what would be interested to work on for the next year, 2022 in this case. And we want to bring these ideas up to the steering board and propose which of them we would like to do a scoping on and find interested partners. So that would happen in the fall. We could scope these topics, and when we've defined the cold scope and we have a committed group of partners that want to go for that, we decide on that in the work program, and then the next year we develop the call and open the call during that year. So it's a long process, but in that way we can, ongoing meetings and the cycle.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions, maybe also from the chat? Nicholas, is something that you can bring up? Oh, yeah. So how do you evaluate pre-proposals? I understand the expert evaluation is for full proposals.
Yes, I can start from here, and Fredrik can continue. Indeed, that is correct. The pre-proposal evaluation, pre-proposals are not evaluated in the same way as has been described now in this presentation. The pre-proposals are looked in terms of eligibility and scope, which is a slightly different problem, but it's also explained in the context.
So it's more that the pre-proposals are used to coordinate also between the funding agencies before and give feedback to the project teams, I guess.
Indeed, in our case, the pre-proposal is a kind of a stage of guidance to the project participants who want to write the project. So, for example, if they happen to be ineligible for some reason of the very different national rules we have, then we will inform them of that, and they have time to do something in between.
Yes, and if I remember correctly, it's also different in different organizations. Fredrik, some of them cannot even, evaluate pre-proposals. Some of them can.
No, so the process is different, but just like Antti said, it's very much of a guiding principle where we try to, the pre-proposal is the stage where we can get the first contact between the interested stakeholders and consortia and their ideas to the national and regional funding partners. And then each one, based on what they have as limits, they do their assessment of the eligibility, and this can also relate to content if there is something that is challenged on a national and regional level. And then we use a traffic light system together in the network to try to give a feedback more general to the project, but then they can do a lot of changes in the consortia. So we do not evaluate and give feedback on the content on the international level in this phase.
Thank you, Fredrik. Nicolas, we have some questions from the chat. Maybe you can summarize them up and we can try to give very quick answers or move the answers forward to the chat. Let's have a look. What is the human capacity in person months per year in the call management that is needed to conduct the annual calls? Yeah, very good, but maybe also tricky question.
Yeah, no, but I think we can see now we have a steady state that goes between 1 and 2 people full-time. We have put on more and more work, but I think also with more efficiency and now latest with less travel, this also actually saves time. So I would say around 2 full, then it's not only spent on 2 people, but 2 full working persons a year, then that's about where we are now.
Very clear. Any questions left, Nicolas, from the chat? How do you introduce regional and city participants? How do you include transitional work with innovation approach in your calls? Very good point. I think there is a short answer to the last question, the innovation approach, challenge-driven calls. Fredrik, maybe 2 sentences on this. The rest, I think, will be answered during one of the next blocks of presentations.
Yeah, very short. We've put a very high emphasis on what we call the need owner, the problem owner, you could say, but we want the projects to really start with the customer or someone that has a need in the regional or local society, and to define the project based on their need. Having all this said, we will come back a little bit more on later on, but I want to be humble also, of course, to get an interdisciplinary approach. There's a lot of work left to do, and we are not at all there, but we're trying to go further onto that, and we're also looking at other networks that might be more successful on that.
Very good, thanks. By this, the rest of the questions we will try to answer in the chat or take them over into the other sessions, and we will start our next presentation block. This is a block dedicated to also a very important pillar of the initiative that you have seen at the beginning, that is the knowledge community. So how can we gain the most out of the projects that we are funding all together in terms of, at the one hand side, make them work together and benefit from each other. On the other hand side, for us as funders to use and get this knowledge very early in the process, not to have to wait for 5 years until we have the project reports out. And on the other side, how can we use that strategic knowledge that comes out of the projects to learn how to build the initiative in the best way for the next coming years to feed this policy cycle that I was talking about at the beginning. This is going to be presented by Ludwig and Julia from Baum Consult in Munich, who are leading this knowledge community management that is also working together with Click Innovation and RSE in Italy. Hello, Ludwig and Julia, the floor is yours.
Hello, Michael, and hello, everybody out there in Europe and beyond. I'm happy to join you here together with Julia to tell you a bit about what is a knowledge community and how do we try to manage it or to successfully manage it. Above all, the knowledge community tries to manage the knowledge of multiple groupings or networks. Of course, it's about our own projects in the joint programming platform Smart Energy Systems, but we link that to the knowledge in other national programs and to the knowledge in international programs, like the Horizon level and so on. And there is a huge European knowledge base, not only from the programs and then the projects that are funded. We have the ETIPs, we have been listening to the Z-Plan speech from Michele and so on. So we are trying to link all these together to the benefit of all of them. This is a shocking picture, and it's just there to explain how broad our approach is. I mean, we put ourselves in the middle, of course, but what you see on the right, we have contact to many national level activities, national projects, country agencies, and so on. And more like on the top left, you have the world of the Horizon, the European funded projects. And it's not only the Horizons. I mean, we also have contacts to the Interreg world. We have contacts to such initiatives like Germany has started on European Climate Initiative. So there's a huge magnitude of activities going on for the future energy system. And we link to all of them. Some are organized like we are, for example, on the European level. On the top left, you see the Spring project that has been awarded a contract by the Commission to manage the Horizon projects on energy, together with the ETIPs and this ETIP-SNet and linking it to the set plan and so on. So this is the message that we are trying to get in contact and jointly create knowledge and then exchange it between all these networks and all these levels of activity of innovation. At this point, I hand over to Julia, because you know better than I do what that means in the day-to-day work.
Yes, thank you, Ludwig. Good morning to all from my side as well. Yes, what does that mean? How is this knowledge community organized? So basically, this knowledge community is a group of people, and we have more than 2,000 people that are members of this knowledge community, and this is project partners, but also external experts, etc. And how does that work? So this knowledge community is the place for reporting and transnational formative evaluation, which takes place online on a digital tool, but also with peer-to-peer sessions for feedback for the projects. Then we have also thematic knowledge sharing and creation in the framework of working groups. So those working groups gather project partners and external experts as well. And they are organized along different topics, from system architecture and implementation modeling to storage, regulation and market implementation, or consumer and citizen involvement, for example. And those groups meet from 2 to 4 times a year. And the members work on those topics based also on the results of the projects. And from these working groups and this work in the working groups, the experts develop spotlights for the scaling and the replication of knowledge. So the idea there is to work on existing documents. I will detail that a little bit in another slide later, but basically work on existing documents and give the feedback from the Joint Programming Platform initiative on these existing documents. And so that way, create knowledge and also contribute to the knowledge creation at European level and beyond. And also in the framework of this working group, they develop recommendations for decision makers and agenda setters. And that's actually the policy briefs, which is also big results of the initiative and the knowledge community. And this is also the place for matchmaking of experts and project partners. And that we will also develop a bit later, but the idea is to do matchmaking for project generation and to increase impact. And here is just a little representation of how this transnational reporting works. So it's on a digital platform, but this is just to let you know. So that's the red, in the red circle, you can see that basically this reporting that the project partner do on this digital tool feed into different type of report and different type of work. And this is, to show you that they report on this at transnational level once, but then this work for the different organization, the call management, the coordination services, etc., etc.
Yeah, having said and heard that, I try to explain it a bit with a picture that shows the flow of the information and the knowledge. Of course, everything starts with our projects, and yes, also other projects on national and international level. And from there, we derive the information. As Julia explained, first of all, we have this reporting mechanism, and the input from the reporting mechanism is fed into multiple channels. So the first channel, as Julia said, is the formative evaluation channel. So we digest that, we have these peer-to-peer sessions, and the information, the joint information or the knowledge goes into the projects. But at the same time, information from the reporting is taken to organize and manage the agendas and the topics of the working groups. And from time to time, we also define a task force for, so cross-cutting task force for multiple working groups, for example. And then the working groups co-create knowledge. So they join, they compare what they found, and they create what we call co-created output. This output is mostly kept in so-called living documents. We will see that later. And from there, it feeds into the projects. But from there, we also then derive these policy briefs and spotlights, as Julia explained. So the spotlights more like very dense information about the joint knowledge, the policy briefs, the recommendations, what should funding agencies, what should other decision makers in policy or also in companies, what should they do based on our findings. And from there, we create all other types of communication, whether we put it into project brochures and publish it, or whether we put it in the LinkedIn channels and all these multimedia and social media channels. So this is the flow. Above all, it's not that we take the result from a single project, we compare it to other projects. And Julia will explain a bit how that process works.
Yes, so this is a little bit just in quickly in more details how it works for the work of the working groups. So yes, the transnational projects and external experts join into a working group. Maybe you can click once. Yeah, Ludwig, thank you. And then they select reference documents, as I said, and that can be, for example, we have a transposition guidance for energy community or recommendations from the bridge project. So there are different type of documents, and they create discussion documents based on these reference documents, where they bring their experience and their feedback to these reference documents. And then this feeds into then the spotlights and the policy briefs. I guess we can we can move over to the questions, and if you want to know more about that, we can also detail in a later stage, I guess. But yeah, this is basically how the workflow works in the working groups.
Are there any questions? Michael, you follow the chat, is that correct?
Nicolas is supporting us with this, and I think we have definitely some questions. So thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. Before we move over to the questions in the chat, I would like to invite Gerdi to come up with maybe your questions that you have.
Yes, well, it's a world here that really is difficult to grasp when you're first confronted with it. So if I'm looking at those working groups, it's not clear to me who's in these working groups, and if we're talking about the policy briefs, who is sending them and who is receiving them. It's very interesting, but there's a lot to ask. And maybe these two first.
So from time to time, we ask ourselves how it can work, but it works since years now. Maybe first of all, your question was who is in the working groups. Basically, the working groups are composed of the consortium members of our funded projects, but we also have experts from industry, from other projects. We invite them. Some stay, but the projects as such, it's not really mandatory, but we really ask them to contribute to the work in the working groups. So, Julia, tell me, maybe it's 80% or 90% composed of our own projects, but 10-20% are invited guests that continuously contribute to creating such knowledge. With this idea that Julia has explained here with the reference documents and the discussion documents, from time to time, I mean, we look at these so-called reference documents and compare our work and the work of our projects to the reference documents. From time to time, we invite people that have created such reference documents. I mean, so we get first-hand information about the background of such a document.
Mm-hmm.
But more or less, we can say that the target audience of the policy briefs are, of course, the members of our network, so the program owners and program managers at first hand, but also their national backgrounds, because sometimes we discover some briefs that tell us that the formal framework or the supportive framework has to be changed. The regulatory framework has to be changed, or other things that are not in the direct influence of the funding agencies that are involved, but in the influence of their entire national network. And also, on the other level, the target audience are the European working groups that we have together with the European Commission, because of course also these regulations that are made on the European level are interested in those findings. So the target groups are the policymakers in the countries, but also on the European level.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a sentence, because Gerdy also asked who creates them. I mean, the process is like that. I mean, we discuss that in the working groups, and less with our projects and with guests and other experts, and we propose such recommendations. But at the end of the day, it's not only the projects and the knowledge management men that we compose. At the end, it's the steering board of the initiative that approves these recommendations. So the recommendations, the policy briefs, are sent by the initiative as such, not by the single projects. I think this is very important.
Mm-hmm.
If I may just take one question from the chat, because I think that refers very much to what we are talking about at the moment. There was one question, I think, from Peter Novotny. Would it be interesting for the Knowledge Community Network to share new knowledge with the public on a regular basis that could help to adopt new technologies and solutions? And I think one level or one tool to have this exchange with the public are the policy briefs. The other tool are these experts briefs that Ludwig was talking about, because they're exactly on the expert level and I think the question is very good, because to find frameworks where we could present this and discuss that with stakeholders outside the knowledge community would be very important, because the one way is to try to get people into the knowledge community in order to discuss with them. But on the other hand side, we have these outputs, and we could also bring it to other groups and discuss it there. Sorry, Gerdy, but you have another question.
Yes, well, I have two questions again. I would be curious how many policy briefs I can think of, and is there, if you were talking about one call, would that go into one working group, or do you have many? And another, let's stick there.
I think this is Julia.
Yeah, so I can reply to that. So first, the question beforehand, yes, the policy briefs are recommendation for policymakers, and the spotlights are these recommendations for experts, and they are public, so everyone can access them on the website, and we also distribute them to the newsletter recipients. We have at the moment over 1,000 participants. About who take part in the working groups, how that's organized. So we have 5 working groups that are organized thematically, and all the projects partners can take part where their project is related to the topic of the working group.
And the topics are cross-cutting issues, Julia, exactly. Right? So it's important to understand that we are not following single projects or single calls, but it's more. Can you just name a few of them?
Yeah. So there is the first one is system architecture and implementation modeling. The second one is on storage and cross-energy carrier synergies. The third one is regulatory and market development. Then consumer and citizen involvement and interoperability and standardization for the last one. And then there is also regional matters now, a new one actually, which started lately.
And with these working groups, we also can react to urgent needs. For instance, in the community, in the last year, there was last 2 years, there was a big focus on this new topic of energy communities, because this was really a big need. All countries were struggling to implement those initiatives, to interpret these European regulations, and to implement those regulations on a national level. And I think here we could really, for the first time, make also a very visible contribution to a very actual topic, where as well the Commission on the European level could benefit from this collaboration, not only of our projects, but also with the European projects together, to bring out a common, more or less, knowledge base and overview about all this knowledge that is created at the moment, because we need it now. And also this was made available to all the regulators. Do you want to say a word? There was a meeting, I think, also with the European regulators. Gerdy, one more if you want, then we move over, but one more if you want.
Yes, please. The peer-to-peer, that was also interesting to me. Can you tell a bit more about how this monitoring peer-to-peer is put in practice?
Yes.
Julia, in short.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, so basically there are like 4 to 5 projects meeting together with representatives also of the initiatives. And this is also based on their results, but it can be different from the topics of the working groups. And they exchange on their results, and they get feedback from both the initiative, also the call management and program management, but also from the other projects, which helps them, of course, to go on, but also to do matchmaking and cooperate in some different topics when they want to work together. And also, of course, then we get to know the results and to include that in the work on the working groups or in the work as at the level of the joint programming platform. Then.
Yeah, because if you're a project in a bunch of projects of a call, then you all of a sudden maybe recognize, oh, there are 3 other projects that are working on a similar topic than I do, and that might change a little bit how you look on your project plan or so.
Yes, interesting approach.
Thank you, Gerdy, for these very important questions, and I hope that has helped. The answers have helped to clarify a little bit more how it works. We have to move over to the next session because there's still more that we want to tell you about, and the next session is dealing with what we call the impact network. Now I think I'm maybe struggling because I should share my presentation again, right? So that's the wrong one. I'm sorry for this.
Michael, I can share it for you because I
that would be great. Thank you very much. Yes.
If you don't mind, take mine.
Cool. Oh yeah, we've agreed on this. Sorry, it was my mistake. I'm a little bit out of. Thank you, Ludwig. So the impact network approach. What is it about? There was a question before in the chat that was exactly addressing this. So how can we involve stakeholders, for instance, from cities, city governments? How can we involve the regional stakeholders? How can we realize that transdisciplinary approach that we are after? And this was really one of the questions that bothered us a lot. And the answer that we found is the following. If you press once, Ludwig, then we get an arrow that points you to the fact. Normally in the projects, we have this, let's say, common RDI stakeholders. In our topic at the beginning, that were grid operators, technology providers, ICT solution providers, and of course, research institutes. But it was hard to get really the people from the regional level, from the cities involved. And therefore, we created this network with what we call the associated partners. And these associated partners are meant to be intermediates that can help to reach out to the need owners that Fredrik mentioned before, the potential buyers and users of the solutions that we create, the regional and local decision makers that decide on which kind of technologies and solutions will be implemented on the city level, on the regional level, the regional and local innovation ecosystems, because the local companies, the SMEs, all the other businesses on the local level, and also the customers, they have to be part of these innovation systems because they want to be part of the value chain of these energy systems that are very participative at the end. And there's also another level of the innovation ecosystem that involves all this startup community that is around. And this is a very global and very agile community, and how to link them to this regional level. And of course, we're also looking about follow-ups, financiers that can help to implement those RDI projects on a regional level, because somewhere our portfolio of support ends, but we want to create an environment where they seamlessly can move over into higher TRLs and market introduction of those solutions. And to loop those players in, we use the associated partner network that are able, that should be partners that are able to reach out to those really partners on the local, regional level, in the startup world and so on, and help to bring them into the projects at the end. So on the program level, we work with the associated partners to bring those partners, relevant partners, into the projects. So roles that associated partners can have in the network is they can participate in co-creation of the network itself, but also on the calls. They are expected, some of them are expected to co-finance the RDI projects. Some of them are expected to help startups and other innovators that are not so used and cannot easily work with the support mechanisms that we are providing, to loop them in maybe on another angle, on another level. They can support accompanying product development, help taking solutions that are developed into the praxis, and provide aggregated input to our program and projects. So we also consult with them somehow when we design the joint calls. Next slide. These are examples. Here you see examples for regional agencies, business agencies, or ICT platform providers like the Energy Web that is providing the global energy blockchain, but also IEA networks like ISGAN that are more partners on the strategic level. This, for example, is a level where we exchange also on the policy briefs with the ISGAN partners and so on, but also ICLAI or other regional players that can help to reach out to these local and regional governments, and also partners that can help finance higher TRL levels. So this was the examples, and now I think I will move over to Fredrik. Next slide, please. Yes. Is Fredrik there?
Yeah, I'm here. I hope you can see me.
Christian, can you put Fredrik on the screen, please?
Yeah, I hope now I will not confuse everyone, but I will make a little short story, and then later on my colleagues will help me to explain what I tried to say. So this idea of the need owners, the associated partners, what do we really mean? On the one hand side, it's nothing completely new. It's something that is out there all the time, but how do we find problems to be solved and someone that really needs these problems to be solved where we can contribute with R&D? So I brought with me here, I don't know if you can see a little Lego piece. This is a police. This is a need owner. He or she is in our network, and they have a problem. The problem they have is it seems like the walls of the prison they're breaking, so the thieves go out of the walls. I'm sorry for the storytelling here, but this is just the beginning. So the problem we want to solve is somehow the walls of the prison is not good enough. And if we bring in the research and innovation community, there's a lot of people that love to invent new walls and everything. So they have you can see all the pieces here. how would they put them together in the best way? But we don't want to fund them to build a completely new prison, because we know there are prisons out there. Not everything can be wrong. So we might bring in a pile of blocks where someone already have started, but they don't know how to fix it. But this might be in our network of need owners. We might have much better prisons. We have one here that it has a problem here. And this is what we want the solution. So instead of financing everything from the base, we find here in our network a way to target. Here we have a part of the solution. So then the R&D will be targeted towards inventing a good wall that could be in this little room here. Of course, again, this is, as any problem solution in society, this is not something innovative. But what we want to do with our network is to try to get the associated partner to bring in these pieces and give an easier map to our community. And this will be explained later on how this can happen with some of the networks we have. But this is the basic idea, to try to give them a map for the innovation. So with that, I hand back, and I hope I didn't confuse everyone.
Great, Fredrik, really great. What you found in the room of your children. So unfortunately, they were not building energy systems at the moment, but more prisons. So you used that example, but I think it served very well. And it brings us to the two examples, practical examples that we want to show to you. The first one is the network with the digital platform providers, where exactly we want to provide, as Fredrik has explained, a world for our projects where they can build on building blocks that are already out there. And this is explained by Ludwig.
Yes, thank you, Fredrik, for this brave introduction of our Lego models. Indeed, we talk a lot about the Lego because you know the Lego are very versatile pieces and they have good interfaces, excellent interfaces, unique interfaces. And this is especially important when you talk to digital platforms or ICT and so. And what I put here is something that actually came out of a European project, FINESC project, where people discussed, okay, what is it that we really need to manage an energy system with ICT tools? And they came up with this layer model. And yes, we also used Lego blocks there. And more or less they said, okay, there is a physical layer, and on the physical layer, you know that this is the stuff that is inside your computer, and then you have generic enabler software. This is something that you do not only need for managing the energy system, can also be used for managing the health system or whatsoever. This is generic, so like all types of blockchain technologies. And then it comes to domain specific. This is something in ICT that is built on the generic stuff. This is very specific to the energy system. And then we have high-level services. That is something that people are really after. It builds on the domain-specific stuff. And then you have business applications. This is at the end what we really need. And a lot of that wall has been built, but the situation is that people don't know it, and there is a chance or also a danger that they start reinventing Lego blocks. This is not what we want. What we want is that we fill in the missing pieces. So what we want is that we do invest the funds of our funding programs to not reinvent the wheel, but to create the missing Lego blocks, and to also make sure that these missing blocks also fit to the others. I mean, this is the question of the interfaces. We give the projects or the to-come projects, we give them contact to existing solutions or established solutions in digital platforms. And we talk about platforms because they frequently build on each other. And we help at the end of the day also our projects to get more impact beyond the funded phase. I mean, they will have more impact if they know the right people to combine their solutions with. They will have more impact if the blocks fit to the other blocks and the interfaces fit to the other blocks. So this is what we want. And so we bring in these digital platform providers to move the blocks in, so they fit what we do. We select advanced solution providers, smaller ones, bigger ones, from time to time also solutions that have been developed in a preceding project. This creates a variety of cooperation models. Some give away their software solutions for free. Some say, okay, you can test my software solution, but I would like to see the data that you collect because that helps me improving my solution, and so on. It's not that these DPP partners sell their solutions to our projects, but there is multiple ways of creating win-win-win situations. The third win is our initiative, of course. We create matchmaking opportunities where they come to the tools where these solution providers meet the potential candidates for applying, and they can then decide upon which model they will use to combine their solutions with the new research activities and the new solutions to be developed. And at the end of the day, Frederick, we have this little nice wall for your prison.
Very good, Ludwig. Thank you very much. So this is how we enable projects so that not everyone has to knit their own little blockchain, which is a big task, but can use tools that are already around out there on a global level, and hopefully help to scale up their output also with these existing platforms. That brings us to the second example that is going to be presented by Jatta Jussila from Click Innovation in Finland. Hello, Jatta.
Hello.
Good to have you here today. And what Jatta will present to us is another tool that we have developed that is called the Validation Network, where we work together with already existing living labs all over Europe. Jatta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. And Ludwig, can I have my one slide there? It's easier. Yes, thank you. Yes, so I was thinking to briefly explain you this validation network, what it is and why it has been established and what it can do. And this figure, a bit complicated, maybe is trying to explain it also in one illustration. So this is actually also what Frederick was telling about, that the validation network can be understood as this house, which is then can be used to test and validate some new services or technical innovations that the projects are developing. But also it would include the people inside the houses, because to really validate the service innovation, you need to involve the customers and customers to the validation work. So the idea of building this network was to find out or locate this type of sort of living labs where the customers are involved, and also test beds that are more maybe technologically oriented from different countries, so that the new projects could easily find these already existing test beds and living labs to help them validate the outcomes that they are developing in their coming projects. Last year, we organized 2 open calls to find this type of living labs and test beds. And via these calls, we found 67 living labs and test beds from 21 different countries. Most of the countries are from Europe, but not all. We have also countries from outside Europe on the list. This list of these living labs and test beds, you can find it on the website of the Eranet Smart Energy Systems. Under validation network, and under this, in this list, you can find all the contact information to the selected members. And the idea is to, as said, support the coming projects in finding this type of partners, so that they don't need to start from building the walls and trying to locate the people who would be willing to participate in the validation work of their service innovation, for instance, or why not also technical innovation. But they could only sort of connect with this already existing environment, and then focus on developing this piece of wall that Frederick was showing, sort of, which is their main interest, of course. So that is basically what this validation network is all about. And of course, in the future, during this year, it might be that we will arrange maybe next calls to find out even more. But currently, we have the 67 labs on the list.
67, that's impressive, Jatta. You did a great job to bring them on board, and they're really spread wide over Europe. But if people out there are listening and you have created a living lab in your environment and you want to join the club, I think we will find a way, as Jatta said, with another call for such initiatives, making it easier for our projects to find partners to validate their solutions that they are providing and not having to build up their own environment for years before they can start. That's hopefully two practical examples how this impact network approach works, and I guess there will be a lot of questions out there. Do we have Gerdi around? And maybe Gerdi wants to start with questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting. What I would like to ask is there any experience from the participants, both from the side of the open of the network, the impact network, and the projects on how this all works?
Fredrik? This is very new. We have to confess, and we are really in the first stage of it. So,
yeah, I can mention. I mean, when it comes to the testbed and living lab network, and also the digital platform provider, we have only launched it now for the ongoing calls. So we have had the calls to gain the networks, and having that said, it took a while to set up the concept. So this is what we've been working for before. But then we have other parts of the associated partnership idea has been around. And this we've done for many years. Maybe Ludwig can say more about it, but we have invited the projects in. Yeah, Ludwig, maybe you can go on and give some examples.
I mean, what we do, we create the opportunity. We select the partners, whether it be the test beds, living labs, DPP providers, and so on. And we list them on our website, and then we organize matchmaking. We will see that in a minute when we talk about the digital tools. What I can tell you, and we do not really interfere, and we do not force applicants to join forces with DPPs or test beds, but what we can tell you, they frequently meet on the matchmaking platform. We don't check who with whom, but we know that there's a lot of traffic on the matchmaking platform between the DPP, the living labs, and the consortia that plan to apply.
That's good to hear. So that means at least the concept seems to create some attention. Yeah, let's see how successful it will be at the end.
Do we still have time, or
we have time for questions, Gerdi? Yes.
Yes, I had another one. You're trying to get these various parts of the whole building into the projects as well. So, is this what's the role of the impact network when compared to the projects themselves, where we also want to have need owners?
I can start on that if you want to, or you want to say something, Ludwig, first? No, I just one thing we see that I think it's definitely a complementing role, because sometimes you want to have a need owner in the project, but when it comes to replication or saying, is this only for that specific case, or how could we replicate this to be of a more common interest, then the outer circle we believe is very important. So how can you transform this to other customers with the same need? So that's one example how it relates.
Maybe I could add there that, of course, for instance, for some service development project, if you would involve in that project several living labs with different type of customer base, you would get sort of the knowledge immediately in the project about how they, about the customer sort of acceptance and how they feel about your innovation. So that would be maybe, I think, a good idea for some projects.
And it's also the other way around, Gertie. The other way around is like we, for example, in this digital platform world, we know platform providers. Michael has mentioned the blockchain people. We know these blockchain people, but they would not try to get into one single project. They would try to cooperate with multiple projects. So more or less, the DPP partners are linked to the initiative and provide their support to multiple projects. So this is one of the ideas behind, and I think, Jutta, the same is true for the test beds.
Yes.
The test beds welcome multiple projects that we do.
Sure, of course.
While not being a consortium member.
Yeah, or in some cases they can even be a consortium member. It depends, of course, on the task that is developed.
Maybe I don't know if
they don't want.
I don't know if our audience out there is already completely overwhelmed, or we have somehow. Yeah, are you still on board? Do we have any questions from the audience out there? Nicholas, do you have something for us? Not at the moment. Okay, so maybe it was too much, or it is the ongoing discussion in the group is interesting enough. Gertie, if you want, you have time for another question.
Well, maybe these living labs, it's interesting. They participate as partners, so they are their own organizations and they're partners to smart energy systems, if I understand it correctly. Yeah.
Yes, the living labs have a real life sort of connection to the system and also customer base.
Somehow, of course, such partners have to decide somehow. Are they partners on the initiative level? Then, of course, we could involve them in preparation process of calls or whatever. Then, of course, they cannot be part of a funded project. If they don't get involved in these preparatory processes, they can also be part of a funded project. And in the case of the living labs, it's more that they are on the side of the projects at the end. So we are already always talking about the kind of shopping list that they are providing, and where the projects can then, find their way how to work together with them.
They have
more on the project level.
Yeah, sorry, Michael, I was interrupting. Yes, they have different models, the different living labs. So some of them can enter a project. Some actually are providing their services for free, but they might have their own application process to get in touch or to get their services. But all this information can be found on the net, on the website, where we have collected this information from all these 67 partners that have been selected so far.
And I can add one little thing which is important. The network that has set up with this partner, we have been very clear that this is not an exclusive network. For the projects, they can find a similar partner outside.
Sure.
This will not be any discrimination in the evaluation. So it's more as of a service. But of course, there are benefits for those we believe that are in the network because they are more visible for the projects. But you can find a partner outside. That's fine.
Very good point, Frederick. That is indeed the case.
And we expect also that there is a benefit for the living labs themselves to become part of this network, because they are organized, all the living labs in Europe, not only in the energy sector, but also in the health sector or whatever you can imagine. They are organized in a big organization, the Living Lab Network of Europe. But they don't have so far a specific group on energy living labs. And this is what we're going to try to build together with the Living Lab Network on the European level, a specific group that is dealing with the topics in the energy field. So living labs in the energy field are somehow with this also creating their own community to a certain extent.
Yes.
Before we move over to the last presentation session, I just want to check that we don't miss anything from the chat, or if there is anything important from the side of the speakers or the discutants in the group now that wants to be mentioned. Nicholas, do you have anything for us? Nothing at the moment. I just saw a question, but that has been discussed in the chat. How do partners benefit or projects benefit from joining the knowledge community? Is it just something that we put as a burden on them, or how do they benefit? And I think there are multiple benefits that maybe you can just mention some of them, Ludwig and Julia, to elaborate a little bit on this, and then we move over to the last session.
Well, I mean, what in a sense, the biggest benefit, and this is what they tell us, is that not only they talk to each other in this Internet transnational world, but now lately, as we explained, we refer to these so-called reference documents, and this is other worlds, and this is what they like a lot, because it's very, very difficult. This entire research innovation world is big, and it's even bigger than Europe. And what we bring with all these processes, whether it be the knowledge community, whether it be this associated partner program, what we bring in and what we can support the projects with is access and
Yeah.
information. And it's not that you just Google. I mean, what we do, we from the knowledge community management or the entire coordination team, we digest that, we collect it, we select the right test beds that may benefit us. So this is what the projects appreciate a lot.
So everyone gets really access to this big knowledge pool, brings you into another world, says Ludwig. I think that's really true. We at the meetings we see that, and also in the feedbacks from the projects, we see that they see several benefits of joining this community, and I think that's also what it's about. It has to be as attractive that the projects love to go there, not just to be an obligation. Time to move on.
In the last session, Michael, I mean, to do that,
Takes us exactly in the last session.
We structure that process with the digital tool.
So we have organized a last session, and we have to keep that very brief, but I think it's important, and we wanted to mention that separately, that we took it from the beginning on as an important task to work on tools, how to support all these concepts. You have seen that many of these concepts involve a lot of stakeholders. They are not so easy to implement, and you need really a clear focus how to implement those processes. You need structures and you need processes. And structures and processes can very often very well be supported by digital tools. And therefore, the last session is about how we try to utilize targeted digital tools to support the different functions of the network in communication, collaboration, coordination of the different actors. And I think we jump into it again with Ludwig to present, I think, the first set of tools.
And I say it up front. I mean, of course, we have a website and we distribute everything on the website. I'm not going to explain that to you. What I would like to use as an example is this complex knowledge management world. This also links to the outside and it links to the inside and all the other levels. So this is a good example to describe what we do. From the very beginning, we created a platform. We called it the Experts for the Aeronet. So Xpera. The Xpera is a very versatile platform that allows us to link all these stakeholders, all these parties together and manage the knowledge and the processes. Just to give you a little view, I mean, you're all invited, of course, to register there together with the other, I don't know, what is it, 1,200, 1,500 experts that have registered for the platform. There we do manage this entire work of the working groups. We manage the memberships in the working groups and open and more closed areas for documents being managed by the working groups. Of course, on the platform, we also hold these spotlights and policy briefs, and this is where we jointly develop that. And when we talk about documents, we always talk about living documents. People can work on these documents at the same time and together. And we have a project repository as well. The project repository holds our projects mainly and links them then to this reporting tool. So they put their general information in the repository. This allows us us and the other members of the community to access the projects, but it also links to this reporting tool that is also on the Xpera platform. And as I said, we create this knowledge in so-called living documents. So we were discussing the topics of the working group. So more or less each working group hosts a set of living documents. We organized it like 10 chapters per document, so very well-defined structure. And there is the expert database. This is not only the registered members of the platform, but other experts can enter the expert database. So this can give you a bit of a feeling what it is, a very broad platform managed by us and hosted in a space where people can rely on. It's not something like a cloud or so. We have this on our own servers, and people can be sure that we obey to the rules of policies and the rules of protection and privacy and so on.
Yes, that's a very important point that you're making, Ludwig, and I think this is really the most central self-developed tool that we have that exactly also ensures that we can handle with all these regulations out there on privacy and data protection aspects. Many in the audience maybe also have experienced this platform to be a tool that we started to use also for strategy development processes. So the research and innovation agenda for the CETP was also created with a very broad involvement process that wouldn't have been possible without this tool last year. And I'm really happy that we have it, Ludwig. It's really something that you invented with your team. It's not I mean, a perfect user-friendly tool sometimes, but we have also to confess that it has not been built for millions and millions of euros by big ICT companies, but really by you and your team and the Click Innovation team. And I think that's really a great thing, and we will try to develop that further. Very briefly on some other aspects, one of them, and very important, is the matchmaking platform that we are using. Julia is going to introduce that to you.
Yes, thank you. So basically where Xpera is the tool for matchmaking and for the management of the knowledge community and the knowledge sharing, the B2Match is our matchmaking platform to support project generation. Ludwig mentioned it earlier. So this is happening before the full application from the project partner, the applicants, and they can meet there, and they are also Living Labs members and digital platform provider members. They can create a profile, meet and find partners with a profile and topics related, and they can also read about project ideas from other participants and connect directly via messaging and calls. So that's a very brief presentation of this platform.
Very brief. Thank you, Julia. So whoever wants to experience this, go on the platform and use it. That's the best way. I think the experience was very, very positive. So particularly one example that I always bring are our Turkish partners that really had hard times to get their project participants into the first call when they started to participate in the network. And then they were using the matchmaking platform, and all of a sudden they had really very many contacts and were involved in very many of the consortia. And every time we are talking about this, Chagri is mentioning more or less how important it is that we keep that alive and running. This tool, it's not so much the specific tool that works well and it's a good tool, but to have such a platform, to have such a tool, that's important, that we think. Very last point that we want to make, and that is, we're also working on the development of virtual and hybrid event formats, particularly in the situation that we have been facing since last year, but also before. We tried to avoid travel time, travel expenses, and CO2 for traveling. That counts for all the digital tools that they help us to avoid to meet too much. Of course, sometimes we are happy also to meet in physical events. At the moment, that's not possible, but it's important to have this outreach that is going more and more global, also with mission innovation the last years. of this initiative to have kind of meeting formats that are dedicated to different things that you want to achieve. It makes a difference if you want to organize a board meeting and enable people to take decisions, or if you make a workshop with 50 participants that want to go into 5 breakout sessions during the workshop, or if you want to do a public event where you want to present something in a lively format and well prepared with different materials, hopefully also being able to use videos more and more, or if you want to create a conference. And there's also one additional idea that we are working on, that is videocasts and podcasts for our projects. And maybe, Fredrik, you want to take 1 minute to talk about this idea.
Thanks, Michael. Sorry for the delay. There was the mute button again. There was some window. So the podcast is one example. I mean, as we mentioned before, communication is, of course, one of the key things. And I think this program dialogue is an excellent example of maybe what used to be either physical meetings or sometimes a little online meeting, but in WebEx or something, now is merging into new formats where you can have a dialogue, and it might not even be easy to say sometimes whether it's a conference, is it a webinar, is it the dialogue. Then we have, of course, on the side of that, we also have the podcast, which is a known way to do this, but without video. And we have said that there is a lack of an integrated dialogue about the energy transition in Europe. We know many podcasts in the US, for instance, but on the European level, how can we connect what's happening in all the different programs and on national, regional level? Maybe we could have that as a place to bring in the experts we have in our network and the challenges that we are discussing, and have a very interesting podcast about it together in Europe. So this is one of the ideas. Then exactly how we would formulate it, that is still to develop, but this would be a mean to create a better impact and from our networks.
So you see, there are also still new ideas that we not even have started to implement. One thing, and that brings us more or less to our very final session of wrapping up, answering last questions and goodbye, is that one of these event formats is a yearly joint programming conference that we're doing in the sector of system integration and energy systems. And maybe we have this last slide still on, because this is an invitation to join this conference, which will happen in autumn this year, and also our joint call launch event in May. So the joint program conference is really a conference format where we do different things like policy conference, bringing together all the stakeholder groups on the policy level, in the set plan in our field, but also bring all together these projects that we are funding, and a status conference to show where we are in the development, and family of projects meetings for our community. So this is happening in autumn, at least 3 days long. Unfortunately, we are not sure if we will have the possibility to do it really physically in a place, or if we have to do it very much online. That's probably the case. I think we go into 2 minutes of wrap up, maybe a very last intervention from your side, Gerdi. Maybe last questions that you want to clarify.
Well, I think that this question that we had from the chat, how do you handle public access to the knowledge and non-public elements? I think it's an interesting question. So Ludwig, please.
May I just one thing? Because I avoided to show this complicated pyramid picture, but we have a concept of different layers in the initiative, how to share knowledge, that reaches from the projects where it's very confidential, into the working groups where you open up a little bit in a closed group, but it's larger than the projects, up to the levels where we have things public, like the projects that Ludwig told about, the policy briefs, the expert briefs, which are then the elements that we can really make public. So there is a clear approach how to share knowledge on these different levels and how to open up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one sentence maybe. I could explain it in an hour because this is a really tricky thing in the Xpera, and we are very eager to manage this knowledge on multiple levels, as Michael explained. In general terms, the members of the knowledge community and the people that access this Xpera thing are two types. One is the so-called followers. They cannot see much, but we can make them interested in what we do. And then they sort of apply and they tell us what do they want to do on the Xpera and what do they want to contribute to the community. And then we do accept them. In 95%, we accept them, but they get the feeling that if they cannot just follow and take something, they have to contribute as well. And then the third level is if you are in a working group, you have to really be accepted for the working group, and then you get access to documents that the rest of the community doesn't see at all, which is restricted to the members of the working groups. So right. This is what creates a lot of trust in the community.
Wow, that was a lot of stuff today that we tried to convey and that we tried to present. We hope that it was received well. Thank you very much, Gerdi, for supporting us in taking things or getting things a little bit clearer than it came out from our presentations. Thank you, every one of the presenters, to prepare this. Thank you, my co-moderators, Gerdi and Fredrik. Thank you for the technical team to support us again in this. Michele, thanks for joining us at the beginning, even if it was very short, but important to show the link to the European level and European initiatives. Thank you very much for the audience, for your active participation and your questions. If you have further questions, please post them. We will try to answer them at least in the chat or contact us via the different channels and email and everything that you have. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and a good weekend.